The Honesty Podcast is a space for women who know that they're meant for a life that's full of magic, excitement and wonder. If you're ready to reconnect with your power and listen to that inner knowing that says you're meant for more, grab a tea, take a breath and let's begin. Hi and welcome back to the Honesty Podcast. In today's episode, I'm going to be talking about finding the courage to take responsibility over your finances. And I felt really pulled to do this episode because this is something that I've personally been going through lately. And I definitely for a long time was sat in this sort of place of doing the inner work, but then not following it up by taking action, because taking action felt way more uncomfortable than dealing with the limiting beliefs that were coming up. There's one thing to look inwards and notice the patterns and the emotions that are coming up, and that can be scary enough. But then I think it's something completely different to look at the habits and the action around that specific subject and change it, because that's where it feels really uncomfortable. That's, I think, where the change starts to begin. And so, especially as I love helping women reconnect with their inner power, to move from a place of feeling stuck and stagnant into following a path that feels aligned and creating a reality that feels really authentic and aligned to them, I do think that being responsible over finances is a huge, huge topic that women need to connect with. Because finances, whether we like it or not, money is energy, and it is very much part of this 3D world. It's how we eat, it's how we put a roof over our heads, it's how we go out and enjoy experiences, it's how we travel, even meeting up with friends, we'll be at cafes. It's how we keep the economy going through spending money at, for me personally, it'd be at local businesses. And there's a very sort of taboo feeling around money, about talking about money, especially with what's going on in the world right now. But ultimately, money is energy and it only enhances the hands that it's in. So, I feel very personally that we have a duty to form an amazing relationship and reconnect with that power of money, because with money we could do amazing things as women. And that starts with finding the courage to take responsibility over our actions with money. I have been doing this recently. It's felt very confronting to actually acknowledge where I've been at with money and start to change my habits around it. But I do think that it's such an incredibly important time in history to be able to do this kind of work, because first of all, with what's going on in the world, but then also because astrologically we have two major planets that are moving into Aries, which is all about taking courageous action. Can sometimes mean being quite impulsive, but that's where the not self behaviours come in, and I'll talk about both today. So if this is something that you feel like resonates with you, if you feel fed up of being in a place of lack with money, if you've been avoiding looking at your bank account, if you feel like you're chasing your tail every month, money comes in but then money goes straight back out, if you are in debt, if you don't have savings, whatever it may be, if you feel like you don't have a good relationship with money, if you feel quite powerless when it comes to your relationship with money, then this is such a beautiful place to begin, because it's not just working with the sort of subconscious beliefs, but it's also bringing it into action so that you can start to see changes in your life around money. And I'll talk about the astrology first because I feel like this is a fun place to begin. But on the 26th of January, we have Neptune, which I like to think of it as like the 4D world. So Neptune is like the spiritual world, it's the subconscious, it's energies, it's kind of like the planet of just the dreaming and the world we can't necessarily see, but we know we're part of if we're tapped into that. Neptune moved into Aries. So we spent the last 14 years with Neptune in Pisces. Neptune is the ruler of Pisces. So I do think we had a lot of incredible spiritual sort of experiences come to the forefront. So I know that astrology's really taken off, human design's taken off. We've had a lot of, spiritual teachers rise, and even like in like non-spiritual sort of worlds, like women have definitely started getting way more in touch with the feminine and witchcraft and looking at oracle cards and tarot, and it's just become this thing that's more normalized than it has been before. I think we've all gone through a lot of healing, a lot of looking inwards. It's been 14 years of like a lot of deep inner sort of spiritual work, and it's felt quite heavy at times. I've thought, looking back over the last 14 years for me anyway, I've definitely had moments of really feeling like I'm working on a lot internally. And then that has moved now into Aries, which is all about courage and action. And I think we need this now because it's almost like we got lost in this world of inner work and spirituality, and almost like, especially with Pisces as well, it's, we do need to put 2 feet back on the ground and start to take action around what we've learned. And so Neptune moving into Aries, I've felt like a rush of energy around wanting to take responsibility and take aligned action with everything that I've learned from Neptune being in Pisces. Then we also have Saturn, which is very much part of this 3D world. Saturn is the planet of boundaries and structure, and Saturn has also been in Pisces for the last couple of years. Anybody who's had their Saturn return in Pisces over the last couple of years, I've got a few friends, definitely know it's been sort of this watery, sort of weird energy, especially because I don't think Saturn necessarily enjoys being in Pisces. So Saturn then moving into Aries as well, again, it's like that structure and them boundaries around taking action. And I think when we've got these 2 planets together, and I want to talk about finances specifically because this is something that I'm working through and enjoy working through with my clients as well. Marrying the 2 together, we've got all of these subconscious thoughts that we need to start to take action on to move that energy through, aligned with this Saturnian energy of creating boundaries and structure around that. So rather than have this impulsive energy of going and spending money that we don't have, keeping on with the habits around money that have kept us in this place, it's such a beautiful time to look at our habits around finances, look at where we're maybe neglecting ourselves and our internal power by giving it away through impulsive action with finances. And it can be a very, very confronting thing. It can be overwhelming when you first look at it, especially if you've been avoiding it for years. My habits were definitely something that had formed a pattern, and it was very uncomfortable, if I'm being honest, when I first looked at my statements. The reason that we are in situations where we have given that power over is that because ultimately when we confront it, it doesn't feel nice. It feels very uncomfortable. We have to sit with certain emotions and feelings that are coming up, which is why I do think it's so important that we look internally and acknowledge and accept any emotions, feelings, thoughts, beliefs, patterns that are coming up, which is very in line with Neptune, looking at that 4D that we can't necessarily see, but we know that it's there. Alongside then, okay, what aligned action can I take that then ruptures that pattern, that creates this new habit, even if it's taking it one step at a time, which I always recommend anyway, so it isn't something that ends up being, you start taking action and then you stop because it just feels too overwhelming and then you're back to square one. So really working with these 2 energies right now, and especially because Aries is that cardinal push forward energy. Think of spring. It's when, Aries literally is a big burst of fire energy. It is a fire sign. It is a cardinal sign. It is, the first sign in the astrological year. So it is this really push forward springtime like energy, and is ruled by Mars, which is all about taking action. So if we're to think of finances and using this energy, then you definitely have what it takes, and you definitely will have the energy to get out of a situation where you are powerless with money. Because money is just energy. It's such a beautiful, beautiful energy when respected, and we are not disconnected from it. And I think that, even from being young, especially in the UK and probably other countries as well, there is such limitations around money. And growing up, we're told, money doesn't grow on trees. There's a lot of apprehension with money. Our parents probably felt certain emotions around money. Maybe you grew up and you didn't have a lot of it. Maybe you did grow up with a lot of it, but people constantly said that anybody who was wealthy was evil. There's so many different limitations and limiting beliefs collectively, societally, that we have around money. And so I do think that it's easy to have that disconnect when really everything is interlinked. Everything is oneness, and we are not disconnected from money. And this is why it's so important to change this mindset around it, because when you think that money is separate from you and you have these limiting beliefs about it, we're almost repelling it and pushing it away, because it literally knows what we're thinking and feeling. And so again, it's like not only are the patterns coming up through action and habits, but also through our internal dialogue and belief systems. So working on both together and finding the courage to actually say to yourself, this is the time that I'm going to change my relationship with money. I'm going to no longer be in debt. I'm going to no longer spend money frivolously or irrationally when I receive it. I'm going to be able to feel safe with money and secure with money and hold money, and actually create a life for myself that supports me and doesn't feel like I'm in this constant fight or flight chase scenario, which, let's be honest, does not feel good. And when we have bigger dreams, such as starting a business, running a successful business, working on our nutrition, going to the gym, traveling, spending time with loved ones, all of these things involve money. And so if we have this sort of lack, pushing away mindset, and then backed up with anytime we have money, we're spending it, or we're spending money we don't have by putting it on credit cards, and then feeling shameful about that, moving back into that guilt, lack mindset, it's no wonder that we feel stuck and stagnant and powerless. And so now is the time to take a deep breath. You can do it with me. Deep inhale through the nose, exhale, just release any emotions that are coming up right now, and say to yourself, no, this is the moment that I change this narrative, this story, and therefore the circumstances within my life around money. And it is a courageous act, because you could research everything about money. I know that I've done this in the past. I've read the books, I've done the seminars, I've done the meditations around calling more money in. And every time that I did this, I would still have the habits that made sure I had no money. I would receive money off people and then I'd spend it, and then I would feel terrible. I've been in debt in the past and had help with that, and then straight away gone back into debt because I had not done the internal work to then help with that pattern and that external work that needed to be done. So, you can always wish for more money, but unless you really nip the habits in the bud around not being able to hold money and spending it and being impulsive with it, you are never going to get anywhere with money. And there's a statistic, I feel, with people who win the lottery more often than not end up losing all of the money really quickly, or spending all of the money quickly, let's say, and often going bankrupt, because holding money and having a healthy relationship with it and taking aligned action with the money is a completely different feeling to receiving loads of money and then just not being able to hold it and spending it. And half the time we don't even know what we're spending it on. And I think that's where we feel even worse. And the shame grows and the guilt grows, because half of the time it's like, oh my God, I had this money and what did I even spend it on? And one of the big things here is that we need to release judgment over how we feel. But most importantly, I do think like there is something so powerful about taking responsibility over our lives, over our actions. And why not now? Why not now with money? If you want the end of this year to feel completely differently with finances and to see money growing in your account and to feel abundant, then why not now? Let's do it together. Let's use this energy from Aries and Neptune and Saturn and have fun with it a little bit and just find that inner courage to actually change your life. Because you can do it. Anybody could do it. It's just honestly feeling comfortable in the uncomfortable. It's being brave enough to look at your bank account and want something and really want something in that moment and not get it. It's creating a plan that is realistic and requires you to not be impulsive. And that's the hardest thing, I think, about money. That we live in a world where, let's be honest, you go on social media, you turn on the TV, you turn on the radio, you go out to football games or sporting games, and there is so much advertising and people selling. And if we are in this sort of habit of spending whenever we feel like it, even if we don't have the money, then it can be so hard to switch to forming a pattern with money that feels more aligned. But you don't have to do this on your own. You absolutely can start to change your mindset around it by doing the inner work as well as taking the aligned action. It's not an impossible task. It just requires you putting your finances as a number one priority over everything else. It's literally long-term gain for feeling uncomfortable right now rather than a short-term gain for continuing on having a relationship with money that doesn't feel aligned and doesn't feel expansive. And I think that we do have to get to a point where we're so fed up of feeling like shit with money that we do want to change it. And I think this with anything in life, same with fitness, same with, food, moving our bodies, same with a career we don't like, same with a relationship we don't want to be in anymore. We have to feel like, I just want to change this in order to make the change. And if you don't feel like you're there right now, that's okay. Again, no judgment. You're listening to this podcast, so there's obviously something coming up for you where you are intrigued by this. But it does mean putting the thing that you want to change, so in this case finances, above everything else as the priority. And if you are spending money on other things, if you aren't looking at your bank account, if you aren't creating a financial plan, if you aren't taking time to do meditations, breathwork, EFT to change your thoughts and mindset around money, it isn't the number one priority. That comes first. Like spending money on a new dress is coming before sorting out your finances. And it's just, even if it's slowly, it took me years to get to a place where I'd finally had enough and I sorted out my finances. It took me working on other areas of my life at the same time to get to this place with finances, because I realised that if I did want this big, bold, beautiful life that I'd been dreaming of, a huge part of me having this was having a great relationship with money and not only attracting more money and calling more money in, but then also not releasing it straight away. Like, I need to be in a place where I'm holding money, I respect money. I always think if money was a person, how are you treating it? So if this was your best friend, for me it would be that I'd been inviting that friend over and then panicking and shoving her back out the house. I would never treat anybody in my life like that. So it has just taken a little bit of sitting with, what does my relationship with money mean? How am I treating money? How do I feel like money treats me? You know, what is that relationship like? Is it healthy? Is it unhealthy? And what am I willing to change right now? And it really has to be small stages with it for it to be sustainable. So I think a lot of the time, you know, you wouldn't run a marathon tomorrow if you'd never ran before. You would maybe go and do a walk first, or you would do the couch to 5k. It has to be baby steps, because again, it's like you are building up your nervous system around this. You need to feel safe taking aligned action with money and being patient. And I think we are guilty of not necessarily being patient in life, and I think that's where sometimes as well it's really easy to say we're taking accountability and taking responsibility over our lives, and then 1 month later we're back in the same old habits because we've not seen huge change in a short period of time. So this is going to require some patience, but again, it's just being really gentle with yourself and really envisioning you 1 year from now, if you are going to start taking action today. You know, me and my friend started at the gym over 12 months ago now, so like in January 2025, and we were terrible. I couldn't even do a push-up. We were both laughing. I think I'd done like 3 push-ups on my knees, and it was hard to face the fact that I just wasn't very fit in the gym. But through forming a habit around it, through finding the courage to take action over a year, I am in a completely different place now. It's actually wild. I did an unassisted pull-up for the first time ever in my life before the end of the year, and I would never have even thought I could do that at the beginning of the year. So it really is just, again, building a trust muscle with yourself around finances and saying to yourself, okay, if I could just, for example, print all of my statements and look at what I'm spending. This is something I did. I just sat and printed my bank statements, credit card statements, the lot, and just sat and looked at exactly what I was buying, because I think a lot of it was me spending and refusing to acknowledge that I'd even spent that money. It was like girl math. It wasn't real. Like, oh, like just £30 in a like tarot shop. So much money on coffee, and pretending it wasn't a thing. And only when I faced it and acknowledged it could I then form a new habit around spending. And for the first month, I just sat and reflected. I didn't do anything else. I just sat with the fact that I was acknowledging what I refused to acknowledge before, which was obviously spending so much money on coffee, which if you live in a city centre, you'll know that, you know, coffee culture in city centres, walking with a coffee, everything, like it does fill my cup, no pun intended. But if I wanted to start saving more money and paying off debt, that habit needed to change. It felt too confronting to change it straight away, because this was something I was used to. It was a habit. It was part of my identity at that time. So my first thing I did was just acknowledge, sit with it, highlight it, take accountability for my actions. I was responsible for spending that money. I needed to sit with that for a little bit. It felt quite confronting. I needed to do some EFT tapping. I needed to release any shame and guilt that had come up with that. And then I could move on to, okay, what can I change now? Where can I make coffee instead of spending it? Can I invite friends over instead and we have a coffee at my house instead of going and meeting at a cafe all the time? What was small, subtle changes that I could begin to take where I was actually being responsible over my finances for the first time in a very long time? And it was just baby steps and just being so easy internally on yourself. Because the more we judge ourselves, the more these feelings of lack, of scarcity, of disconnect with money come up. We really need to be kinder in our self-talk so that we find it easier to start taking responsible action, aligned action, and then give yourself time, 100%. Do not be impatient with this. If you end up spending money one day, don't then throw everything out the window and say you can't be responsible with money, you've had a 1-day blip. Think of all the years you've been spending money without taking accountability. Like, 1 day isn't gonna, ruin things. It just means, again, taking a breath, coming back to that inner work and starting again and not giving up. If you were going to the gym, I like to use the gym because I just think it's such like a great example for us to visualize. But, if I was going to the gym for 3 months and then I had a takeaway and then I just never went to the gym again, I'd feel awful because I'd had 3 months of work. Why would I throw that away over like literally having a takeaway? So don't do the same with money. If you really want to change your life and gain that power back with your finances, and believe me, I just think it's such an important time for women to be wealthy because we are so intentional with the way that we spend our money, and we could make the world such a beautiful place to live if more of us had such a beautiful personal relationship with money and really reconnected with our power when it came to finances and wealth. I personally believe that money enhances the hands it's in. And I know so many women out there, so many amazing women who all they want to do is nurture and give back and see a positive change happen in their environment, in their spaces, with their teams, if they run businesses. So I just think the more that we can cultivate a great relationship with money, the wealthier we can become and not feel guilty about it, the better the world will be. But it needs to start with you being responsible for money. That's where it begins. I'm going to end the podcast here. Thank you so much for listening. I really hope that this resonated. This is going to be one of many podcasts I discuss money because I've just sat with it recently over what does it mean to me to help women reconnect with their power. And I think money is such an important subject. So we're going to dive deep. I'm going to be sharing my personal experiences because, again, as somebody who's coaching people with this, who's somebody who is very client facing, who has now a platform on YouTube, I think it's so important to be honest, hence the podcast name, with my own journey as well, because we need to lead by example. So thank you so much for tuning in, and I hope to see you in the next episode. I work with women who know that they're meant for more. If that's you, you'll find everything you need in the show notes.